Good evening. It's nice to be here tonight. My wife and I frequent Sidney out on the waterfront as much as we can, which is not often enough. We've been coming up here for about 7 years and truly love our time here. And as I said, wish we could spend more time. I've never really studied Sidney from the perspective of my business, in that I always look at it as a great place to get away from my business, quite frankly. But regardless, what I did is I put together a brief slideshow that I thought I'd try to take 30 minutes to walk through, and then it'll open it up for question and answer. The slides is kind of about our firm, what we do, how we try to do it, and some of the things that we've done over the years as well. I think it might be of some interest to you. Let's see. So as a company, as you heard, we actually founded the company in 1994. We incorporated in 96. We're out of Portland, Oregon. I feel very, very blessed to have grown up there. Portland, like your city here, we're very fortunate that we live in, I think, unquestionably the most beautiful place on the planet, perhaps. I grew up in the outdoors, doing a lot of climbing, backpacking, kayaking, and so on. And so kind of had a grounding in the environment around me and enjoying it as a recreational person, if you will. My early career, I was always interested in real estate. Started out in the brokerage end of the business and then started doing a lot of build-to-suit work in the early 80s, and then got into real estate development. And when Bob and I started the company, even though I have an MBA and this is contrary to everything you're taught, we had no business plan. We thought that we could make a go of it, and we really still don't have a business plan, quite frankly. And kind of what occurred over the years really wasn't something we planned to have occur. But both of us really enjoyed the outdoors, and our industry is one that I think probably because of the risk. I tell people I used to be 6 foot and had a full head of hair, and this is what's left. But because of the risk and the capital-intensive nature of it, it's not an industry that is really prone to innovation. It's an industry that I think is more grounded in what worked for the last 50 years, ought to work for the next 50 years, and I personally don't think that's a good model for anything. So we really kind of wanted to explore how to do things in a more environmentally friendly way, and that was kind of the gist of how we started. Also in our industry, we're pretty left-leaning politically. In fact, we're real far left-leaning politically. So a lot of the governments that we've worked with over the years, we've really embraced their principles around planning because we believe the same thing. Oregon, we have what we call an urban growth boundary, where we're trying to preserve farmland, if you will, and create more density in our urban core, which we really believe is the future. So as a result of that, we've had a lot of opportunity to work with cities and trying to do some pretty creative things. As a company, we kind of have 4 core groups. We have an investment management group, where we deal with separately managed accounts, and more recently, first of all, we survived the downturn, number one. Number two, we were very fortunate during the downturn. We went out and raised our first equity fund, and we're now an SEC registered firm because of it, and we're out raising our second equity fund right now. And those are Green Cities 1 and Green Cities 2, and you can guess where those names came from. The core of our business, really where we came from, is that as a development firm. We started out in office. We got into mixed use probably in the mid to late 90s, very shortly after we founded the firm. Today, I would say, if you ask me what we do, it's urban, infill, transit-oriented, highly sustainable mixed-use projects. And a few words, that's probably how I describe ourselves. Also, we have a lot of expertise and experience in doing historic renovations, which I'll talk a little bit more about. As you would expect, we have asset management and property management. Property management is something, it's a black hole. You know, nobody ever calls you up and says, geez, the lights came on, thanks. Nobody calls you up and says, God, the janitor did a great job last night, thanks. It's nothing but problems. But we learned that we really needed to have that. And I think it's really kind of around community building. It's one thing to identify a site, design a building, get it built, get it leased and stabilized, and then move on. However, one of the things that we think we need to be doing, that we're trying to focus on more and more, is curating these buildings. And that is the communities that move into them. Certainly we have an idea of who they're going to be, whether it's an office user or an apartment building. But they are always morphing and changing. And so we really look at our property management group as a curation group. to really kind of help create that sense of community in the buildings and wrap the buildings around the tenants as opposed to trying to wrap the occupants around the building. And the last is we have a group called Edlen Sustainable Solutions, and that really came out of our expertise in sustainability. We started to have government entities and corporations come to us and ask how we could do it cost effectively, and we thought, well, maybe there's a business there. It's been a really tough business. We've done a ton of solar, third-party solar. I think we've done the largest rooftop in the United States back in a project we did in New Jersey. However, the holy grail of that is really doing retrofits. And we have not been that successful at it, quite frankly. Financing's been a real tough battle around that, especially during the downturn. You know, I look at the built environment, and in a good year, when things were booming, which they're not booming today, they're a lot better than they were 2 or 3 years ago. But back when things were booming, maybe we added 1% to 2% to the inventory every year in the cities. What about the other 98%? You know, we got a lot of buildings out there, the energy hogs, sewage hogs, water hogs. And to me, I think that's kind of the holy grail where we can really move the needle and help clean up the environment and leave a softer footprint behind. So as it was mentioned, we've done about $5 billion worth of work. I mentioned up and down the West Coast. Today we have active operations in Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and more recently, Chicago and Boston. We spend a lot of time on airplanes, unfortunately. Again, we didn't plan to do this, it just kind of happened. And it is exciting going to these different cities. When we went to Boston, it was really kind of cute, or fun. The head of planning went in to meet him the first time, and he said, "I know you." I said, "What do you mean you know us?" And he said, "Well, we've studied your projects." And so for us, as we've expanded to new cities, the kind of how we try to do business, being transit-oriented, infill, and highly sustainable, it's made it really easy for us to expand our business as we've moved into different cities across the country. And it's really allowed us to get into those cities and understand them and kind of understand the fabric of those cities as opposed to just coming in and trying to plunk down a building. So why green? I mentioned earlier that for us it was kind of an ethic thing as we started the business. I remember one of the early build-to-suits we did. We do a lot of build-to-suit businesses for corporations that don't have the in-house expertise, and it's a core piece of our business. I remember we were doing a build-to-suit for a subsidiary of PG&E out of San Francisco when they moved a chunk of their people to Portland. And we were doing light shelves and didn't know what they looked like. And I remember going over to the metal bender shop and telling them how I thought maybe they ought to look and how they ought to bend them and shape them. And we put them on the building. And then we put in, this is in the early days, put in a ton of light sensors and motion sensors and all types of things in the building that were all pretty new. And every time I'd drive home from the airport at night, all the lights in the building would be on. Finally, one night I stopped by, tried to figure out what was going on. And the night guard, was there, and I asked him to show me his routine. So he gets up from his desk, and he takes me up on the 5th floor and gets out and walks on the elevator. Well, sure enough, as soon as he walks out of the elevator, every light on the floor came on. And so I suggested to him maybe if the lights were out, he'd just stay in the elevator and go to the next floor. So we've had a lot of lessons we've kind of learned along the way as we've gone about our business as well. Today, I think we're seeing a real trend towards people my age, but more so people that are my kids' age that have really wrapped themselves around the environment. I tell people when I came out of college, it was Vietnam and civil rights. Those were the causes of the day. Today, I think these kids coming out of school, it's their environmental footprint. And I think we're playing right into it. Whether it's office space or living space, they want to be in places that are more active, where they've got the restaurants, they don't have to own a car. Maybe they want to ride a bike, maybe they want to walk, maybe they want to take a streetcar, whatever the case may be, but they're moving in a very different direction. In Portland, I was talking to somebody out in the hallway about the bike scene. It is absolutely on fire. We have about 18,000 bikes a day coming into the city. I happen to be an avid bicyclist myself. And in Portland, what we've seen, we've got an industry that's built around those bicycles. We got manufacturers of hubs, we've got manufacturers of bikes, we've got manufacturers of clothing. We've got 2 of the world's foremost apparel manufacturers who have put their North American headquarters in Portland. So we're starting to see an industry that nobody planned to happen just kind of evolve. And we've got streets in Portland right now where we're looking, we've got a 2-lane bike lane going down it, we've got 2 car lanes, and we're about to take out one of those 2 car lanes to make the bike lanes wider. When you park your car, We have a favorite restaurant over in the neighborhood, and when you go over there, and if you park your car, you got to be careful opening that car door because the bicycle traffic is so heavy. To me, that's a great thing. So at any rate, we're seeing more demand for it today, and the other thing people ask me about is cost. And when we started down this path probably 15 years ago, if we we're going to do maybe a LEED Gold building today, or back then, you know, it might have cost us 5 to 10% more. If we're going to do a LEED Platinum building, it probably would cost us 10% more. LEED Silver building, I don't know, maybe 5. That industry has moved dramatically. Today, we can do a LEED Silver building for no cost premium. It's just smart engineering, design, and construction. We can do a LEED Gold building for maybe a point on hard costs, and we can do a LEED Platinum building for maybe 2 points on hard costs. Part of that is the industry has moved along with us. In the early days, the architects were interested in it, the engineers kind of, and the contractors really didn't want to talk about it, and the subcontractors thought you were stupid. That has really changed. Today, we have all those industries coming at us, wanting to try new technologies, wanting to try new things, and it's really taken off, and it's driven the cost premium of doing highly sustainable buildings down, not to mention that you're operating those buildings at a fraction of the price that you're doing a more traditional building. So it's kind of turned into a win-win deal, and then today, we're starting to see, and I think it's still very early on, the institutional investors that are out there, people are starting to pound on their doors, maybe not pound, but knock on the doors, asking the question of where's my dollars going in investments? And I think more and more we're seeing people being concerned about is my money going into something that is not socially responsible, or is my money going into something that I can be proud of and I feel like, you know, I'm investing in something that's helping protect the environment around us. A lot of the buildings that we've sold over the years, we're first generation. I wish we were second or third generation, it'd be a lot easier. But because we're first generation, we've had to build a lot of things and sell it to kind of keep that capital moving. And so a lot of the buildings we've sold, they're on the covers of prospectuses of people like JP Morgan and others. So when you start to see those people coming and saying, yeah, it's a LEED Gold building, I don't get it completely, or it's a LEED Platinum building, that sounds cool, and they're saying they want that, once the capital starts chasing, I think we'll get a lot more momentum with the whole industry. So does it pay? I talked about property management, and I think we went through a phase probably 5 to 7 years ago where we chucked so much technology into our buildings, trying to make them as energy efficient and water efficient as possible. I think you almost had to have a master's in engineering to run the buildings. Today, we're really trying to think more and more about natural systems, letting nature do the work for us, trying to harness the power of nature. But more so, I think where we're trying to go is trying to make the sustainability aspects of those buildings more visible to the users, so they know they're living or working someplace differently. We hear from some of our office tenants that they've moved in and been there for 3 to 5 years, their sick time drops by 20 to 25%. That's pretty cool. That says something. We're hearing more and more from firms like law firms that are in our buildings, that are in a vibrant neighborhood that's highly sustainable, that they can out-hire their competitors. Because that young man or woman coming out of those top law schools is concerned about where they work. And that's saying something about their future employer, and it's part of their decision process. So we're seeing that demand side driven more and more. So for us, how can we make that more visible? How can we use that as part of creating community, which is what I really think it's about, and I don't think it matters if you're somebody my age or somebody my kid's age. I think in this era when we're all wired 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, running as fast as we can, I think we're looking for more culturally rich experiences where we can come together with other people and live and learn about what they're doing and try to learn from them. So, for example, sustainability, I make the analogy, it's like having a 1976 Volvo. You know, you take that Volvo in, you get a valve job done on it, and it runs great. You know, still got a little rust on the outside, and your son put the soccer cleat through the front seat, still got the hole in the front seat, but it runs great. That's kind of the way sustainability is if you think about it. It's buried in the guts of these buildings. So I think a big part of our job to make it pay is to make it more visible. Now, not only does that help pay, and does that help us brand these buildings and help people understand it, but what's been fascinating to me is to watch people kind of take it over. We built a building a number of years ago. It was a big high-rise, had about 240 units in it. and it was a highly sustainable building, and we thought, well, we're going to start this community thing, we're going to kind of nudge them along, and most people were my age that moved into it, and that we would start this forum around sustainability, kind of thinking about what they could do. Well, we had the first meeting, we were there in the meeting, we're kind of getting it going, it's a crowd kind of like this, maybe more people, and we weren't 20 minutes into it, and we were completely out of control. I mean, that crowd, they had more ideas about it, and they wanted to run with it, and they wanted to do it. We found in our apartment buildings, we've had people call us up and say, would you come over and check the air conditioning? It's never come on. We've had tenants in those buildings where you're standing in the elevator, and I might be standing next to somebody else, and somebody will look over and say, so what was yours? What was my what? Well, I just got my electric bill today. What was yours? Ad hoc competitions on who has the lowest utility bills. So what we think the real power is, it's kind of like the last mile analogy, maybe in telco or something like that, is our job is to try to create a framework around which people can discover ways for themselves to live and work in a more sustainable fashion, changing their habits. Maybe they get rid of the second car, or the third car, or the second and third car. Or maybe they start thinking about what they do with their lights. Most of our apartment buildings today, we're putting in all these apps that go on your phone that'll tell you how much energy you're using, and you can do it remotely, and this and that and the other thing. So at our mailboxes, instead of just having a mailbox, we have a little meter. So I call it the Prius effect. And as you got the Prius and tells you how many miles per gallon you got today. Well, if I got 42, why can't I get 44 tomorrow? Same thing. So that little meter is their electric use for that month. And I go pick up my mail, and I kind of look at mine, and then I look at the one next to mine, and and if I see somebody that's way off the chart, I'm thinking, what are they doing? Or if I'm way off the chart, I'm thinking, wow, I better be more concerned about my energy use. So try to get kind of some friendly competitions going, and that kind of comes back to that idea of trying to curate these buildings. So I talked a little bit about products. I'd say we're pretty frustrated around products. I don't think we see as many new ideas as we'd like to. I think, again, I talked about earlier how we used to chuck these buildings full of technology, and we still do. Today, our typical building is a LEED Platinum building. We're probably using about 50 to 60% less energy than a typical building. On the water side, depending on what we're doing, we're probably closer to anywhere from 40 to 70% less water. And on the sewage side, we've actually done some things I'll talk about in a moment that I think have been pretty creative that I'm pretty excited about. So community. I talked about a little bit about how we're trying to create community and how we're trying to curate these buildings. We're really trying to think more and more about how kind of art and architecture come together. Thinking about how if we can create interesting spaces, people will want to come back to them again and again. And trying to put art in our buildings, quite frankly. There's a big sculpture, if you're familiar in Portland with Powell's books. It looks like an inverted wheat shaft, and the thing moves. And I've seen people walk up to it and push against it, and I've seen one person scratch their head, and I'm sure that person's thinking it's the dumbest thing they've ever seen. See another person come up to it and push it, and they look at it and they think, that's pretty cool. And the two of them strike up a conversation. And the thing that fascinates me about that is they stopped and paused, and it took them out of their day. We just finished a building down in Venice Beach, California, not too long ago. I don't know if you're very familiar with Venice. It's really eclectic, huge artisan community, very, very cool. So we went down there ahead of time and sent our people into the community and went out and started talking to all these retailers about what the community is about, what's going on in the community, trying to understand it. And pretty soon people were saying, wow, who are these people? Kind of like Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kids, who are those guys? And so we learned a lot about it. So we hired a number of artisans to come in and put art in our buildings. One of them we hired this guy, probably about my age, had a lot of hair, long hair. He's there with a really good-looking woman. I don't think he ever quite came out of the haze from the 70s. And he did this big mural. And, he was late getting it done, but he got it done, and it was really cool. It was kind of off the charts. And then instead of doing an eco roof, we did a vegetable garden on the roof. And then we had 4 restaurants in the building. One of them happened to be a restaurant called Cafe Gratitude. They're a vegan restaurant. They're harvesting off of our rooftop to put into their restaurant the produce that they serve. So, you're kind of seeing people do some different things with the buildings as they go through it. It's kind of one of those things, if you let yourself open up to the different ideas, different things will happen. Now, Venice Beach is not Portland, it's not Seattle, and it's not Boston. Each city has kind of its own unique blend of what's out there, and to the extent that we can understand that and try to wrap ourselves around it and try to create spaces within those communities to become inviting and more interesting, I think that's what allows us to be successful and the buildings and the communities to be successful. We called this notion, we came up with a notion a number of years ago. I got a kick, she said we created it, and I think we did actually, but anyway, 20-minute living. It's kind of caught on, and that is we want to own and develop buildings where within 20 minutes you can walk to work, you can walk to school, you can walk to church, you can walk to the grocery store. And if you can't walk, you can ride a bike. And if you can't ride a bike, you can take a streetcar or a light rail line. I personally believe the gas-fueled automobile is a dead technology. I think it's the bane of our existence. We're bringing petroleum from places that are tough. We're creating pollution from doing it, and we create congestion on our streets. And if we can create communities where we can give people an alternative choice other than driving everywhere in a single occupant vehicle, which is so solitary, I think we're going to be successful, and I think we'll create more interesting communities. So she mentioned our principle of place. And we just moved into one of our new buildings recently, and I had this carved in our wall, each one of these. And to me, I think these are kind of the cornerstone of what we try to do. From building a sense of communities I've talked about, creating innovative spaces, minimizing our carbon footprint. The thing about these buildings are, it's not this device that's going to go away in a year or 2 years or 3 years. If you build these buildings right, they're here for 100 or 200 years. If you stop and think about that, at least to me, that has a really large impact. The sense of responsibility that I think our industry owes to communities like yours is enormous. We have a choice. We can leave behind a building that is architecturally interesting. You may not, some people are going to like it more than others, but it's interesting. It creates conversation. Or we can leave behind a cinder block painted building. Likewise, we can put up a building that conserves energy, conserves water, produces less sewage, and leaves a softer footprint on our environment behind us. Or we can put up a building that's an energy, water, and sewage hog. The thing that I don't think we think about, our industry, and that is that decision that we make is going to have a 100 to 200 year legacy unless somebody comes and bulldozes the building because it's so bad. And those are, to me, very stark decisions to be made as you think about developing new buildings. So a couple examples of projects that we've done. You may have heard of the brewery blocks. This was a 5-city block project we did in Portland a number of years ago. We were way out over our skis. This was in 1999. It was about 1.7 million square feet. It was the absolute first time that we did sustainability on a large scale. We had the first historic platinum building, which I'll pull up here in a minute. We had 3 or 4 gold buildings, and we had another platinum. And for us, it was really kind of an experiment on urban mixed use. We had ground floor retail. One of the things I had up there on my principle of place, but it didn't go through all of them, I'm sorry, is craft the first 30 feet. We think that the success or failure of building is largely going to be determined by the first 30 feet, because that's what we as pedestrians interface with. Doing the high-rise towers is very fun, but if we don't have a pedestrian realm that people want to come to it again and again, we're not going to be successful, and that building's not going to be successful in that community. So this was an opportunity to do mixed use where we had office, retail, housing, for sale and for rent housing, and parking that goes along with it. And the building up on the top was the old brewery, if you will. We preserved the brewery that's there today. That chimney, we poured about $700,000 of concrete in it to preserve it. It has absolutely no function. We debated for months about options to do that. $700,000 is a lot of money. But you know, it's an icon in our city, and we absolutely made the right decision to preserve it. And even today, we still get comments from people that are going through the building or in that neighborhood. This is a project we finished a couple years ago. We delivered this at the absolute worst time. We delivered this in the fall of 2008. Now, we all remember 2008, and it was pretty ugly. This is about a 3-year project. This is roughly a 500,000 square foot building, maybe 550. We've got a retail at grade, 5 floors of office, and 272 apartments. The apartments, the office was pre-leased, thank God. The apartments just went on fire. Opening night, this is an apartment building. We had about 5,000 people show up. The fire marshal finally came over and said, one in, one out. We had an 18-month lease-up schedule, and we leased it in about 9 months. On the roof of this building, you can see 4 wind turbines. It was a pure experiment. We had no clue what we were doing. We wanted to put them up there to see what kind of energy we could generate. Also on the roof, there's a large common amenity on the roof. You can see the solar hot water. You can see the heat recovery ventilators that we preheat all of our hot water for free. You can see the eco roof where we capture rainwater, store it in a tank down below, use it to flush our toilets, our mechanical makeup, our fire suppression, our landscaping. This building was the first one where I think we really got huge value out of sustainability. And again, we brought it to the surface, and we're curating this thing every single day. You know, we get feedback from our property management, our leasing people about what's working, what's not working. We try different things. We get about a 15% rent premium over our nearest competitor. It's about 5 blocks away. And I can, you know, there's many things that made this successful. Sustainability will not make bad real estate good real estate. It's kind of the frosting on the cake, but the combination of community, design, and this was a tough location. Right across the street, we had hard drug and alcohol rehab. Candy Corner, we had an SRO housing deal. I mean, it was a pretty gutsy move. That neighborhood today is now one of Portland's most up-and-coming neighborhoods. This project we did up in Seattle a number of years ago, very obviously large scale, 2 building towers. And this is the South Waterfront in Portland. This is where during the World War II we built the Liberty ships, and unfortunately after World War II we took apart the Liberty ships and asbestos. So this was a brownfield site that we went into and did a major redevelopment. We did probably, I don't know, 3,000 units in it, a number of commercial buildings as well. A streetcar was brought down to it. This is the one where I was talking about where the neighbors, we had that first meeting, the neighbors took over because they were so excited about sustainability and had their own vision of it, and we wrapped ourselves around them when we thought we were going to have to push them along to make it happen. We expanded into Los Angeles probably 10 years ago, and this was our first project down there. And this is in South Park, and those of you who remember the riots, this is where it was. One of the places where it was. And our construction manager went down there. I'll never forget, he called up one day and we were sitting in our office and we had every Monday meeting and one of our projects, and he said, "Are you sure you really want to do this?" I said, "Yeah, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, you know, at night they've got oil drums down here with fires in them in the street to keep people warm when it's cold." So it was, again, going into a new neighborhood, and we went down there and we built 3 buildings. It was a very successful effort for us. The city was a great partner in making it happen. Big part of the street scene down there was trying to knit corners together. We really believe that if we can pull 4 corners together, meaning get some retailers on either side, it gives people reason to cross the street. And in LA, it is very tough. The streets are enormous. And I'll never forget, I was on the sidewalk getting ready to cross. There's a fire truck about a block down. There is not another car in sight. And I step off the curb, and the fire truck starts aiming for me. He's got 5 lanes, and he's aiming for me. A different kind of community. We're a big believer in preserving historic buildings. We've put, I think, 12 buildings on the National Historic Register. Love doing it. It's very challenging, very difficult. I put this one up thinking about Sidney. This is a smaller project we did. We actually bought the building up above. We were going to demolish it. We were going to assemble the block. And then we got inside the building. We saw what was there. And we decided that we really wanted to preserve it. So we took it and turned it into a little 10,000 square foot restaurant that's just been doing great. The bones of that building are just gorgeous. And to bring that back, I would argue that redevelopment like this is probably the most sustainable form of development. If you think about all the embedded energy that's in those buildings, it's significant. But more significant, I think, is it gives us a sense of place. It talks to us about those who came before us. You know, our fathers, our grandfathers. And I think for future generations too, preserving a sense of place and history around our cities is really important. This is a building we just finished. This is a 100-year-old warehouse for Meyer & Frank. Meyer & Frank was bought by Macy's. They're our department store down in Oregon. We had Vestas come to us. They're the wind turbine manufacturer out of Denmark. I swear to God they chose us to do this because they knew we could do a platinum building and a historic renovation cost effectively for them. So we had the entire building pre-leased. Obviously you can see what was there before and then what we did with the building and we're done. It's another LEED Platinum building. I'm told we have the largest roof array in downtown Portland from a solar perspective, and the building's performing tremendously. We're using about 65% less energy than the comparable building. On the water side, we capture rainwater, we reuse it, so we're using about 60% less water, and of course we're putting less water into our sewage system as well. This is one of my favorite buildings. It's named for my partner, the Goering Theater. It's where our repertory theater performs in Portland. This is part of the brewery blocks. We did this for $1, literally. We donated back all of our services. But it was an integral part of that 1.7 million square foot deal. About 150,000 people a year go through that building. They come and see plays, schools come there during the daytime. And to talk about creating a sense of community, all those people have got to go someplace to eat. We happen to have a few restaurants nearby. A lot of those people want to live in the same neighborhood. We happen to have some apartments nearby. What that building did for us was unbelievable. It was a great lesson to us in creating community. The building was just standing up by habit, and we went in and did a renovation that was the first LEED Platinum historic renovation to be done in the country, I'm told. So this was the first LEED Platinum high-rise housing building that we did. It's a relatively small footprint for us in the U.S. You do a lot more point towers up here than we do. Very neat building. The building just kind of went off the shelf, if you will, and it was during the downturn. We were kind of halfway in between. So the first half of it was pre-downturn, the second half was post-downturn. In fact, on the left is another historic renovation that we did for Wieden & Kennedy, Nike's ad agency. They've been with Nike since the very beginning. And most people in this building are my age or older, and they are really involved in the sustainability of the building and actually monitoring the success of the building from an energy, water, and sewage perspective. Talked about this one previously. This building was really a killer deal. Oregon Health Science University came to us to do a build-a-suit for them. This is a mixed-use building. We have 4 floors of wet and dry labs. We have 2 surgery floors. We have a large athletic facility that's 2 floors, and the rest of it is classic medical office building. It's about 400-some-odd-thousand square feet. The city was requiring them to do a LEED Silver building as part of the deal with the financing package the city was putting together for them. And one of my dearest friends, who's now retired, he took him the 3rd time to really get out the door. Dennis Wild was in charge of it, and we brought Dennis on to take sustainability and really move the needle down the road, and he did it incredibly well. But lo and behold, their LEED Silver building turned into a LEED Platinum building. Also in this building, we put a membrane bioreactor in it, which was the first time we had done one. And so we process 100% of the gray water, the black water, and the storm water. We produce about 30,000 gallons of clean water out of the building every day. We reuse about half of it in the building. The city makes this in Portland, put signs next to the toilet that says, "Do not drink the toilet water." Sometimes you got to laugh at yourself. And we exported that other 15,000 gallons into the Willamette River as clean water. Seemed pretty cool. But across the way, we built about 3,000 high-rise apartment units. So we started thinking, that was pretty stupid. That bioreactor could have provided water to all those buildings. Oh, and what's the other thing? 8 to 5, whole lot of toilet flushing going on. Not so much so after 5. What happens in those houses? They come home about 5. They start flushing the toilets. The synergies of mixed use. How can we downsize different systems and buildings by empowering them with mixed uses, where you've got different peak demands, whether it be for air conditioning or heat or sewage or water or parking. By doing that, we can drive the cost of these buildings down and make them more cost effective. So here we had a building that started to get us thinking about eco-districts. What can we do with that? Very cool. I think it uses about 55 to 60% less energy than the typical building. Obviously, zero sewage. and the water use is just fractional. The theater again. So what's next? I was talking to somebody out in the hallway. I'm very jealous of Seattle right now. The Bullitt Foundation put up the first living building, presumably will be the first living building under the Cascadia chapter. We busted our pick for about 3.5 years with the state of Oregon, Portland State University, and designed a living building to meet the living building challenge. Very challenging, very hard. The red list of what you can't put into it, which is very cool, things that have a shelf life of, I don't know, a couple of zillion years. But unfortunately, the state of Oregon pulled the funds during the downturn. It was a public-private partnership. I think this is kind of the direction we're going to go. If any of you are in Seattle haven't been through the Bullitt Foundation building yet, I'm excited to go through it. I think this is the type of thing we're going to move to. I was mentioning out in the hallway, my wife and I have a project we're doing, small deal, little 22 units. We're using the passive house standard out of Germany. And we're doing it just to kind of see how it works. The projections are it'll use 15% of the energy of a typical building. I think we're going to see ourselves going more and more to thinking about how to simplify things, how to make our envelopes better, less on the mechanical side, more on kind of harnessing the power of nature, if you will, in order to try to meet our environmental objectives. I was talking about district scale, eco-districts. I think it's a big part of the future. In North America, we don't have as many of these massive district projects that you see in Asia and India. But nonetheless, I think we have the opportunity to go in and retrofit some districts as well. Thinking about water and sewage in particular, we like to think about what we call distributed infrastructure. And that is if we can, in our projects, if we can control as many of the utilities, and I don't mean buying it from the electric company, I mean generating it. And same thing on the sewage side, processing our sewage and processing our waste, capturing water and trying to control the environment within that building. I think we're going to leave a lot softer footprint on the environment. Also, I think there's going to come a time where you're going to be more competitive if you've done that. We can live without energy. We can't live without water. And it's amazing how we're starting to see shortages in our country pop up, much less in other parts of the world. Communities, I've talked about that a lot, I think, in terms of trying to build community. So we've had the opportunity, and I have very mixed feelings about it. We've been pulled into China in the last 18 months because of our expertise in sustainability. We've been working with an organization called China Development Bank. They're a state-owned entity. I learned a few weeks ago that they're larger than Citibank and JP Morgan combined. They have 38 projects around China. The typical project is probably the size of all of downtown Portland, similar to all of downtown Vancouver. They are massive. The smallest one I've seen is 50 million square feet. This was a picture I took when I was in Jilin, which is, interesting times, north of North Korea. In the morning, my deal when I travel is I try to run. And so I get up at about 6 o'clock, and I look out, and you get about a mile of visibility. And I'm thinking, okay. So I go out, I go for a run, I come back, have breakfast, take a meeting, 10 o'clock, I get in the car. Those buildings are about 800 feet from where I took that photo. What happened between 6 and 10, I think, it's not the cars, the factories fired up, and therefore the coal plants fired up. The stuff is in the water, it's in the fields, it is stunning, absolutely stunning. I just got back from being there a week on Sunday. I'm a little upside down still in my time zone. But the need for some of the expertise that resides here in the Cascadia area, whether it be up here in Canada or down in the US, I think it's just absolutely mind-boggling. I think the opportunities are equally mind-boggling for our children. I was talking to the woman that introduced me about I have a son who's just getting a degree in environmental engineering, will graduate, he's interested in water. She came up to me and said he'll have a limitless future. I think the opportunities for us in this region to export the knowledge that we have and bring some of those dollars, whether they're yours or ours, it doesn't matter much, back to our countries is huge. If we don't, And if they don't, I think we got a big problem. I tend to want to look at his glass as half full and think about the opportunities that we can use to help them and probably build better relationships between our countries and create opportunities for our communities as well. So thank you for your patience. And I'm happy to take any questions anybody has.